The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the manila folder containing the contracts that would destroy my family forever. My sister Emma sat across from me, smiling smugly as she prepared to claim credit for the business empire I had built from nothing. Our parents beamed at her with pride, completely unaware that everything they believed about their golden child was about to crumble. What happened next would expose 20 years of lies, theft, and manipulation that ran so deep it would tear our family apart permanently. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I would love to know where you are watching from today. This tale of sibling rivalry and sweet revenge is going to take some wild turns, so make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking family drama stories. Trust me, you will not want to miss how this sister gets exactly what she deserves when the truth finally comes out. Growing up as the middle child in the Williams family meant living in the shadow of my older sister Emma. From the time we were kids, she possessed this magnetic charm that drew everyone to her like moths to a flame. Teachers loved her, neighbors praised her, and our parents treated her like she could do absolutely no wrong. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one who spent hours in my room sketching business plans and dreaming of building something meaningful with my life. Emma excelled at taking credit for things she never did. In high school, when I spent weeks writing what would become our award-winning science fair project about renewable energy solutions, she swooped in at the last minute with her presentation skills and charisma. The judges were mesmerized by her confident delivery, and she walked away with first place while I stood silently in the background. Our parents were so proud of their brilliant daughter that they never bothered to ask about my contribution to the project that won her a scholarship to Stanford University. This pattern continued throughout our teenage years and into adulthood. Every achievement I worked tirelessly for somehow became hers through manipulation, charm, or outright lies. She had mastered the art of making herself indispensable while making me invisible. Our parents, David and Margaret Williams, never questioned her stories because Emma had always been their shining star, their proof that they had raised successful children. When I graduated from community college with a business degree, Emma was finishing her communications major at Stanford. The family celebration dinner was entirely focused on her upcoming graduation from such a prestigious university. My achievement was mentioned briefly between discussions of her bright future and the amazing opportunities waiting for her. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to stop waiting for recognition and start building something that could never be taken away from me. I moved across the country to Austin, Texas, with $3,000 in savings and a business plan I had been perfecting for 2 years. My idea was simple but revolutionary: a sustainable clothing line that combined eco-friendly materials with cutting-edge fashion design. I called it Verdi Threads, and I was determined to build it from the ground up without any help from my family. The first year was brutal. I worked 3 part-time jobs while spending every free moment researching suppliers, designing clothing samples, and building an online presence. I lived in a tiny studio apartment, survived on ramen noodles and determination, and slowly but steadily began to see my vision come to life. Verdi Threads started as an online store with just 5 clothing items, but my commitment to quality and sustainability began to attract attention from fashion bloggers and environmentally conscious consumers. Meanwhile, Emma had landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm in San Francisco, and according to our parents, she was already climbing the corporate ladder at lightning speed. Every family phone call included updates about her latest promotion, her beautiful apartment, and her exciting social life. When they asked about me, I kept my responses brief, mentioning that I was working in retail and trying to figure out my next steps. I never mentioned Verdi Threads because I wanted to surprise them when it became successful. By the end of my second year in Austin, Verdi Threads was generating 6 figures in revenue. I had hired 2 employees, moved into a proper office space, and began receiving orders from boutique stores across the country. Fashion magazines were starting to feature my designs, and I had been invited to participate in several sustainable fashion shows. For the first time in my life, I felt truly proud of something that was entirely mine. That was when Emma called with devastating news that would change everything. She had been laid off from her marketing job due to company downsizing, and she was struggling to find new employment in the competitive San Francisco market. Through tears, she explained that she was behind on rent and might have to move back in with our parents. As her sister, she hoped I could help her get back on her feet. Against my better judgment, I invited Emma to come stay with me in Austin while she looked for work. I thought having family support during a difficult time might help us rebuild the relationship we had lost over the years. I even offered her a temporary position helping with Verdi Threads marketing and social media, thinking her communications background could benefit my growing business. Emma arrived in Austin with 2 suitcases and a wounded pride that I mistook for vulnerability. For the first few weeks, she seemed genuinely grateful for my help and impressed by what I had built with Verdi Threads. She dove into the marketing work with enthusiasm, creating engaging social media content and helping me prepare for an upcoming trade show that could take the business to the next level. But I began to notice subtle changes in how she talked about the company. During phone calls with our parents, she would say things like, "We are working on a new collection," or "Our company is expanding into new markets." When I asked her about it, she laughed it off, saying she was just excited to be part of something successful and using inclusive language to show her investment in the company's growth. The red flags became impossible to ignore when we attended the trade show together. Emma had insisted on being the primary spokesperson for Verdi Threads, arguing that her communications background made her the natural choice to pitch to potential investors and retailers. I reluctantly agreed, thinking it would help build her confidence after losing her previous job. Watching Emma present my company to industry professionals was like seeing my worst nightmare come to life. She spoke about Verdi Threads with such passion and expertise that everyone assumed she was the founder. When buyers asked about the company's origin story, she seamlessly wove herself into the narrative, describing how we had identified the gap in the sustainable fashion market, and we had developed the innovative manufacturing processes that set Verdi Threads apart from competitors. I stood beside her, seething with anger, but trapped by politeness and family loyalty. Every time I tried to correct the record or share my perspective, Emma would smoothly redirect the conversation back to her vision for the company's future. By the end of the trade show, we had secured 3 major retail partnerships. But Emma had positioned herself as the mastermind behind Verdi Threads' success. The weeks following the trade show marked the beginning of the most devastating betrayal I could have ever imagined. Emma had not only stolen credit for my work, but had begun systematically taking control of the company I built from nothing. She leveraged the relationships she had formed at the trade show to schedule follow-up meetings with investors and retailers, positioning herself as the primary point of contact for Verdi Threads business development. What I discovered next would haunt me for months. Emma had been secretly meeting with a group of investors she met at the trade show, presenting them with a detailed business plan that painted me as a junior partner in the company rather than its founder. She had carefully crafted a narrative that positioned her as the visionary leader who had identified my potential and helped me develop Verdi Threads into a viable business. The investors, impressed by her polished presentation skills and apparent business acumen, offered to provide $2 million in funding to help Verdi Threads expand nationally. The only condition was that Emma would need to take over as Chief Executive Officer, while I would remain as Head of Design, a role they viewed as important but secondary to the leadership position. When Emma presented this offer to me, she framed it as an incredible opportunity that we could not afford to pass up. She argued that her communication skills and business connections made her the logical choice to lead the company through its next phase of growth. She promised that I would retain creative control over the designs and that we would be equal partners in the expanded business. I felt sick to my stomach as I listened to her pitch, recognizing my own words and ideas being presented back to me as her strategic insights. The business plan she had shown the investors contained proprietary information about Verdi Threads' manufacturing processes, customer data, and financial projections that I had never shared with her. She had somehow gained access to my private files and used that information to build her case for taking control of my company. The betrayal cut even deeper when our parents called to congratulate Emma on her amazing business opportunity. She had already told them about the investment offer, describing herself as the entrepreneur who had built a successful, sustainable fashion company from the ground up. Our parents were beyond proud of their golden child, who had apparently overcome her recent setbacks to create something truly remarkable. During that painful phone conversation, our mother gushed about Emma's brilliance and vision, noting how she had always known that Emma would accomplish something extraordinary with her life. When I tried to explain my role in creating Verde Threads, our father interrupted to praise Emma for being generous enough to give me a position in her company, despite my limited business experience. I realized that Emma had been laying the groundwork for this takeover for months, carefully positioning herself as the true founder of Verde Threads in the minds of everyone who mattered. She had manipulated our parents' charmed potential investors and gradually erased my contributions to the company until I appeared to be nothing more than a helpful assistant who had been lucky enough to work for such a brilliant entrepreneur. The legal documents the investors presented made Emma's intentions crystal clear. The investment agreement named her as the majority shareholder and chief executive officer of Verde Threads, with complete authority over all business decisions. My ownership stake would be reduced to 30%, and my role would be limited to design and product development under her supervision. When I refused to sign the agreement, Emma's mask finally slipped. The sweet, vulnerable sister who had begged for my help disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. She coldly informed me that she had already registered Verde Threads as a trademark under her name in California, claiming that she had been planning to start a sustainable fashion company long before I moved to Austin. The legal papers she showed me were devastating. Emma had used her knowledge of my business operations to file trademark applications, copyright claims, and even patent applications for designs I had created. She had built an entire legal foundation that supported her claim to ownership of Verde Threads, and she had done it all while living in my apartment and working for my company. Emma delivered her ultimatum with ruthless efficiency. I could either accept the 30% ownership stake and work under her leadership, or she would proceed with the investors without me. She had already secured legal counsel who believed they could successfully defend her ownership claims, especially given her established relationships with the investors and retailers who were driving Verde Threads' growth. The most devastating part of her betrayal was how she had weaponized our family relationships against me. She had convinced our parents that she was the driving force behind Verde Threads' success, and they were already planning to attend a celebration dinner in San Francisco where she would officially announce the investment deal and her new role as chief executive officer. I spent 3 sleepless nights reviewing the legal documents and trying to understand how Emma had managed to build such a comprehensive case for stealing my company. She had been methodical and patient, slowly gathering the information and relationships she needed to execute her plan. Every conversation we had shared about Verde Threads' challenges and opportunities had been feeding her strategy to take control of everything I had worked to build. The breaking point came when Emma informed me that she had scheduled a board meeting for the following week, where the investors would formally approve the restructuring of Verde Threads under her leadership. She expected me to attend the meeting and publicly support the transition, lending credibility to her narrative that this had always been her company and that I was grateful for the opportunity to continue working with such a visionary leader. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by the remnants of the business I had poured my heart into creating, I made a decision that would ultimately save everything I had worked for. Instead of accepting defeat or engaging in a legal battle I was not prepared to fight, I decided to investigate exactly how Emma had managed to pull off such an elaborate fraud. I started by reviewing every document, email, and file related to Verde Threads, looking for evidence of Emma's deception and any proof that could establish my legitimate ownership of the company. What I discovered would not only expose her lies, but would also reveal a pattern of fraud and manipulation that extended far beyond our current situation. The investigation into Emma's betrayal became my full-time obsession. I knew that if I was going to fight back effectively, I needed to build an airtight case that would expose not only her theft of Verdi threads, but also the systematic pattern of deception she had used to manipulate everyone around her. What I discovered over the next several weeks would shock even me despite knowing her capacity for manipulation. I started by reaching out to Marcus Rodriguez, a law student who had helped me with the initial business registration paperwork for Verde Threads 2 years earlier. Marcus had since graduated and was working at a small firm specializing in intellectual property law. When I explained the situation to him, he immediately recognized the signs of corporate fraud and agreed to help me gather evidence in exchange for handling my case pro bono if we could prove Emma's deception. Marcus taught me how to conduct a proper forensic investigation of my own business records. We discovered that Emma had been far more thorough than I initially realized. She had not only accessed my private files, but had also created false documentation to support her claims of ownership. We found evidence that she had backdated emails, altered financial records, and even created fake correspondence with suppliers to make it appear that she had been involved with Verde Threads from its inception. The most damning evidence came from analyzing the metadata in the documents Emma had used to support her trademark applications. Marcus showed me how to examine the digital fingerprints embedded in every file, which revealed that Emma had created most of her evidence on her laptop during the weeks after the trade show. The timestamps proved that she had fabricated an entire paper trail to support her ownership claims well after I had already established Verde Threads as a successful business. While Marcus worked on the legal aspects of our investigation, I focused on reaching out to people who could provide testimony about the true origins of Verde Threads. I contacted Sarah Martinez, the graphic designer, who had helped me create the original Verde Threads logo and branding materials. Sarah still had all of our original correspondence and invoices from 2 years earlier, clearly showing that I had commissioned and paid for all of the creative work that established the company's visual identity. I also reached out to James Thompson, the manufacturer who had worked with me to develop Verde Threads' unique sustainable fabric blends. James had detailed records of our collaboration, including samples of the original designs I had sketched by hand during our early meetings. His documentation provided irrefutable proof that I had been the creative force behind the innovative products that made Verde Threads successful. Perhaps the most valuable ally I gained during this period was Rebecca Zhang, a former coworker from Emma's previous marketing job in San Francisco. Rebecca contacted me after seeing Verde Threads featured in a fashion magazine article that credited Emma as the founder. She was shocked to see Emma taking credit for a sustainable fashion company because she remembered Emma frequently making disparaging comments about environmental activists and dismissing eco-friendly fashion as a passing trend that would never be profitable. Rebecca had even more disturbing information to share. She told me that Emma had been fired from her marketing job not because of company downsizing, but because she had been caught falsifying client reports and taking credit for campaigns developed by other team members. The company had chosen not to pursue legal action to avoid negative publicity, but they had made it clear that Emma would never be welcomed back to their industry. This pattern of stealing credit and manipulating situations was apparently Emma's standard operating procedure, not an isolated incident related to Verde Threads. Rebecca put me in touch with 2 other former colleagues who had similar experiences with Emma's deceptive practices. They were willing to provide sworn statements about her history of claiming credit for other people's work. As our evidence file grew stronger, Marcus recommended that we bring in Sandra Kim, a private investigator who specialized in corporate fraud cases. Sandra's background in forensic accounting allowed her to analyze Verde Threads' financial records and identify inconsistencies in Emma's version of events. She discovered that Emma had attempted to alter bank records to make it appear that she had contributed initial funding to the company, when in reality, every dollar invested in Verde Threads had come from my personal savings and reinvested profits. Sandra also uncovered Emma's attempt to secretly negotiate with Verde Threads suppliers and retailers to transfer business relationships to a new company she was planning to establish under her own name. She had been using her position within my company to lay the groundwork for stealing not just the Verde Threads brand and intellectual property, but also the entire supply chain and customer base I had spent years developing. The most shocking discovery came when Sandra investigated Emma's recent financial activity. Despite claiming to be unemployed and struggling financially, Emma had recently made several large cash deposits into her personal account. When Sandra traced the source of these funds, we discovered that Emma had been receiving payments from the investor group that was supposedly offering to fund Verde Threads' expansion. It became clear that the entire investment opportunity was an elaborate scam designed to legitimize Emma's theft of my company. The investors were not interested in Verde Threads' potential for growth. They were paying Emma to deliver a profitable business that they could rebrand and control. Emma had essentially sold my company to these investors without my knowledge or consent, using fraudulent documentation to prove her ownership. Marcus explained that what Emma had done constituted multiple felonies, including wire fraud, identity theft, trademark infringement, and corporate espionage. We had enough evidence to pursue criminal charges, but he recommended that we first attempt to resolve the situation through civil litigation to give Emma an opportunity to return control of Verde Threads before facing potential prison time. Our legal team prepared a comprehensive case file that included over 200 pages of evidence proving that Emma had systematically defrauded me and multiple other parties. We had witness statements, financial records, digital forensics evidence, and expert testimony that would make it virtually impossible for Emma to defend her claims in court. The most satisfying piece of evidence was a recording I had made of Emma admitting that she had borrowed some of my business ideas but deserved credit because she had the vision to see their potential. She had made these comments during a phone conversation where I had confronted her about taking credit for my work, not knowing that I was building a legal case against her. As we prepared to present our evidence to Emma and her legal team, Marcus warned me that she would likely escalate her deception rather than admit defeat. He predicted that she would try to discredit our evidence and potentially attempt to turn our parents and other family members against me. What none of us expected was how far Emma would be willing to go to protect the false empire she had built on stolen work. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not only the future of Verde Threads, but also whether Emma would face the consequences for years of manipulation and fraud. I felt nervous, but confident as we prepared to expose the truth about my sister's betrayal, not knowing that she had one more devastating trick up her sleeve. The confrontation we had been preparing for arrived sooner than expected, but not in the way any of us had anticipated. 3 days before our scheduled meeting with Emma's legal team, Marcus called me with devastating news that would temporarily destroy everything we had worked to build. His voice was shaking as he explained that Sandra Kim, our private investigator, had disappeared, along with all the evidence we had gathered against Emma. I rushed to Marcus's office, refusing to believe what he was telling me. How could someone simply vanish with months of investigative work and hundreds of pages of legal documentation? When I arrived, Marcus showed me Sandra's empty office space and the email she had sent that morning, claiming that a family emergency required her immediate departure from the city. She had taken every piece of physical evidence, every financial record, and every witness statement we had compiled. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow when Marcus revealed the rest of Sandra's message. She had written that, after reviewing our case more thoroughly, she believed Emma's ownership claims might have legal merit, and that continuing our investigation could constitute harassment. She recommended that I accept the 30% ownership offer and move forward with the business relationship rather than pursuing what she now characterized as a frivolous lawsuit. I knew immediately that Emma had gotten to Sandra somehow, but proving it seemed impossible without the evidence Sandra had taken. Marcus was devastated, explaining that without the financial records and witness statements Sandra had gathered, our case had been reduced to my word against Emma's word. The digital forensics evidence was still valuable, but Emma's legal team could argue that I had manipulated the files myself to support false claims. The situation became even worse when I discovered that Sandra had not simply disappeared with our evidence. She had actively betrayed us by sharing our investigative findings with Emma's legal team. Emma now knew exactly what evidence we had gathered, which witnesses we had interviewed, and what legal strategies we were planning to pursue. She had been given a complete roadmap for defending against every aspect of our case. Emma's response was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours of Sandra's betrayal, I received a cease and desist letter demanding that I stop making false claims about VertiThread's ownership. The letter accused me of harassment, defamation, and attempting to interfere with legitimate business relationships. Emma's lawyers threatened to pursue both criminal charges and civil damages if I continued what they characterized as a campaign of lies and intimidation. Even more devastating was learning that Emma had used the information Sandra provided to contact every witness we had identified. She had convinced Sarah Martinez, the graphic designer, that I was trying to manipulate her into providing false testimony for a frivolous lawsuit. Sarah, intimidated by the legal threats and confused by Emma's persuasive explanation, withdrew her willingness to support my case. James Thompson, the manufacturer who had worked with me to develop VertiThread's sustainable fabrics, received a similar visit from Emma's representatives. They presented him with documentation suggesting that Emma had been the primary contact for their business relationship and that I was attempting to rewrite history for personal gain. James, concerned about protecting his own business relationships, decided he could not afford to get involved in what appeared to be a messy family dispute. The most painful betrayal came from Rebecca Jang, Emma's former co-worker, who had initially reached out to help expose Emma's pattern of deception. Emma had somehow convinced Rebecca that I was the one who had been manipulating situations and that Emma was actually the victim of my jealousy and resentment. Rebecca not only withdrew her support, but also provided Emma with a written statement defending her character and disputing the claims about Emma's termination from the marketing firm. Within a week of Sandra's betrayal, every ally I had gained during months of investigation had either disappeared or switched sides. Emma had masterfully used the information Sandra provided to neutralize our entire case while positioning herself as the victim of my alleged harassment campaign. She had turned my own evidence gathering into proof that I was unstable and vindictive. Marcus tried to remain optimistic, arguing that we could rebuild our case with new evidence and different witnesses. But I could see the doubt in his eyes as he acknowledged that Emma's legal team now had a significant advantage. They knew our strategies had discredited our witnesses and possessed our evidence while we were left with fragments of a case that had once seemed unbeatable. The worst part was realizing that Sandra's betrayal had been planned from the beginning. Emma had somehow identified Sandra as a potential weak point in our alliance and had either bribed or threatened her into switching sides at the crucial moment. The timing of Sandra's departure and the thoroughness of her evidence removal suggested that Emma had been monitoring our investigation and preparing her counterattack for weeks. I felt completely defeated as I sat in my apartment surrounded by the scattered remains of VertiThreads and facing the possibility that Emma's theft would be successful. She had not only stolen my company, but had also turned my own investigation against me. Every move I had made to expose her deception had actually strengthened her position while weakening mine. The investors Emma had brought in were now pressuring me to accept the reduced ownership stake and stop what they viewed as disruptive behavior that threatened VertiThread's growth potential. They made it clear that if I continued to dispute Emma's leadership, they would withdraw their funding and pursue legal action to recover their initial investment from me personally. Emma called me that evening to offer what she described as a final opportunity for reconciliation. Her voice was cold and triumphant as she explained that I could still have a place in the company I had created, but only if I publicly acknowledged her as the founder and apologized for the harassment campaign I had waged against her. She gave me 48 hours to decide whether I wanted to be part of VertiThread's future or face the consequences of continuing to fight a battle I could not win. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Emma had not just stolen my business. She had systematically destroyed my credibility, my relationships, and my sense of justice. Sandra's betrayal had given her everything she needed to complete the most devastating theft I could have imagined. For the first time since this nightmare began, I truly believed that Emma was going to get away with everything she had done. Just when I thought all hope was lost, salvation came from the most unexpected source. 2 days after Emma's ultimatum, I received a phone call that would completely reverse the trajectory of my case and expose the full extent of her deception. The caller was Detective Maria Santos from the Austin Police Department's white-collar crime unit, and she had information that would make Sandra Kim's betrayal irrelevant. Detective Santos explained that Sandra had not actually disappeared voluntarily. She had been arrested 3 days earlier on charges of fraud and conspiracy related to multiple ongoing investigations. The detective had been building cases against Sandra for months, documenting how she had been selling confidential client information to opposing parties in legal disputes. Sandra's betrayal of my case was just the latest in a long pattern of criminal behavior that had finally caught up with her. The most incredible part was that Sandra's arrest had led to the recovery of all the evidence she had stolen from my case. When police searched her office and personal devices, they found detailed records of her communications with Emma's legal team, including financial transactions that proved Emma had paid Sandra $50,000 to sabotage our investigation. Sandra had kept meticulous records of her crimes, apparently believing she was too clever to ever get caught. Detective Santos had contacted me because Sandra's arrest had triggered a broader investigation into the people who had been paying her for stolen information. Emma's name appeared prominently in Sandra's client files, along with evidence that their relationship extended far beyond my case. Sandra had been providing Emma with confidential information about multiple business deals and legal disputes, helping her manipulate situations for her own benefit. The detective was particularly interested in the Verde Threads case because Sandra's files contained evidence of additional crimes that Emma had committed while building her false ownership claims. Sandra had documented how Emma had used stolen business information to approach Verde Threads suppliers and customers, attempting to redirect business relationships to a shell company she had established under a false name. Even more damaging was the discovery that Emma had been running similar scams against other small business owners. Sandra's records showed that Emma had used identical tactics to steal credit and ownership from at least 3 other entrepreneurs over the past 5 years. She had refined her approach through practice, becoming increasingly sophisticated in her methods of manipulation and fraud. Detective Santos offered to share Sandra's evidence with Marcus and me if we were willing to cooperate with the broader criminal investigation into Emma's activities. The detective explained that our civil case had accidentally uncovered a much larger pattern of fraud that warranted criminal prosecution. Emma was not just a manipulative sister. She was a career criminal who specialized in stealing successful businesses from their legitimate owners. The evidence Sandra had kept was far more comprehensive than anything we had originally gathered. Her files included recorded phone conversations where Emma explicitly discussed her plans to steal Verde Threads' financial records, proving she had never invested any money in the company, and correspondence with the fake investors that revealed the entire funding offer was an elaborate fraud designed to legitimize her theft. Most importantly, Sandra's files contained evidence that completely contradicted every claim Emma had made about Verde Threads' origins. The documentation showed that Emma had conducted extensive research into my business operations before moving to Austin, suggesting that her supposed job loss and financial difficulties had been fabricated to gain access to my company. She had been planning this theft for months before ever contacting me for help. Marcus was ecstatic when Detective Santos shared Sandra's evidence with us. We now had proof of criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft, and multiple counts of trademark infringement. The evidence was so overwhelming that Marcus predicted Emma would face significant prison time if convicted on all charges. More importantly, for my immediate concerns, the evidence completely destroyed any legal basis for Emma's ownership claims. The detective also introduced me to someone who would become a crucial ally in the final phase of this battle. Agent Jennifer Walsh from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Unit had been tracking the investment group that Emma had partnered with as part of a broader investigation into organized fraud rings. The agents had been building a case against this group for over a year, and Emma's involvement had provided them with the evidence they needed to make arrests. Agent Walsh explained that Emma had unknowingly connected herself to a sophisticated criminal organization that specialized in stealing successful small businesses through fraudulent investment schemes. The group would identify profitable companies, recruit insiders to provide access and information, and then use legal manipulation to transfer ownership to shell companies they controlled. Verde Threads was just one of dozens of businesses they had targeted. The federal investigation had been monitoring Emma's communications for months, gathering evidence of her cooperation with the fraud ring. Agent Walsh had recordings of Emma discussing her plans to steal Verde Threads and bragging about how easy it had been to manipulate me into providing access to confidential business information. The recordings were so damning that they would make any legal defense impossible. Agent Walsh also revealed that the investment offer Emma had presented was part of a money laundering operation designed to legitimize funds stolen from other victims. The $2 million supposedly being offered to Verde Threads was actually money that had been stolen from other small business owners through identical schemes. By accepting the investment, I would have unknowingly become part of their criminal enterprise. The coordinated federal and local investigation had been building towards simultaneous arrests of Emma and her criminal associates. Detective Santos and Agent Walsh had contacted me because they wanted to ensure that my civil case did not interfere with their criminal prosecution. They also offered to help me recover complete control of Verde Threads as part of the restitution process for Emma's crimes. Within a week of these revelations, we had rebuilt our case with evidence that was 10 times stronger than our original investigation. Marcus filed new legal documents that incorporated the federal evidence and formally requested immediate injunctive relief to prevent Emma from taking any further actions related to Verde Threads. The federal evidence was so comprehensive that Emma's legal team immediately began negotiating a settlement rather than risk going to trial. The most satisfying moment came when Detective Santos called to inform me that Emma had been arrested on multiple felony charges. The arrest had taken place during a meeting with her criminal associates, where federal agents had recorded her discussing plans to steal 2 additional businesses using the same tactics she had employed against Verde Threads. She had been caught in the act of planning her next crimes. As I prepared for the final confrontation that would restore Verde Threads to my complete control, I felt a mixture of relief and vindication that I had never experienced before. Emma's elaborate fraud had finally been exposed. Her criminal associates had been arrested, and justice was about to be served in the most comprehensive way possible. The final chapter of this devastating family betrayal unfolded in a federal courthouse, where Emma's elaborate web of lies finally collapsed under the weight of irrefutable evidence. The scene was surreal as I watched my sister dressed in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs face charges that carried a potential sentence of 25 years in federal prison. The golden child, who had spent her entire life manipulating situations to her advantage, now sat silently as prosecutors outlined the extent of her criminal enterprise. The federal trial revealed details about Emma's deception that shocked even me, despite everything I had already discovered about her capacity for manipulation. Evidence presented in court showed that she had been running fraudulent schemes for over 7 years, targeting family members, former colleagues, and business partners with sophisticated theft operations that had netted her over $1 million in stolen assets and profits. The most devastating revelation was that Emma had stolen not just from me, but also from our own parents. Financial records introduced as evidence showed that she had been forging their signatures on loan documents and using their credit to fund her fraudulent business ventures. Our parents, who had always praised Emma as their most successful child, discovered that she had been systematically robbing them while accepting their emotional and financial support. Verde Threads was officially restored to my complete ownership through a federal restitution order that invalidated all of Emma's fraudulent legal filings. The trademark application's copyright claims and business registrations she had filed using stolen information were declared null and void. More importantly, the federal court issued permanent injunctions preventing Emma or any of her associates from having any future involvement with my company or its intellectual property. The criminal organization Emma had partnered with was completely dismantled through coordinated federal prosecutions. 12 individuals, including the fake investors who had offered to fund Verde Threads' expansion, were convicted on charges ranging from wire fraud to money laundering. The Federal Bureau of Investigation recovered over $15 million in stolen assets, which was distributed among the victims of their various schemes. Emma ultimately pleaded guilty to 8 federal felonies in exchange for a reduced sentence of 12 years in prison. The plea agreement also required her to pay complete restitution to all of her victims, including returning every dollar she had attempted to steal from Verde Threads and our parents. Her guilty plea included a detailed confession that fully exonerated me of any wrongdoing and officially established the true history of Verde Threads' creation and development. The emotional impact of Emma's confession was devastating for our parents, who struggled to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the criminal who had been systematically betraying their trust for years. Our mother had a complete breakdown when she realized how thoroughly Emma had manipulated their perceptions and used their love as a weapon against their other children. The family dynamics that had defined our relationships for decades were permanently shattered by the revelation of Emma's true nature. Our father, who had always dismissed my achievements in favor of celebrating Emma's supposed success, was forced to confront the reality that everything he had believed about his daughters was based on lies. He reached out to me with a heartfelt apology that acknowledged not only Emma's deception, but also his own failure to recognize my actual accomplishments. The conversation was painful, but necessary for beginning to rebuild our damaged relationship. Verde Threads emerged from this traumatic experience stronger than ever before. The media attention surrounding Emma's arrest and trial brought unprecedented publicity to my company's commitment to ethical business practices and sustainable fashion. Major retailers who had initially been manipulated into working with Emma through her fraudulent presentations now contacted me directly to establish legitimate business relationships based on Verde Threads' actual merits. The company's revenue tripled within 6 months of Emma's conviction, driven by customers who were inspired by the story of how I had fought to protect the business I built from nothing. Verde Threads became a symbol of resilience and integrity in an industry often criticized for its lack of transparency. I used this platform to advocate for other small business owners who had faced similar threats from fraudulent schemes. The legal victory also led to unexpected personal growth and the formation of a chosen family that became more meaningful than the biological relationships Emma had poisoned with her manipulation. Marcus Rodriguez, who had risked his early legal career to help me fight for justice, became not just my attorney, but also one of my closest friends and eventually a business partner when I expanded Verde Threads into a full-service consulting firm for sustainable businesses. Detective Maria Santos and Agent Jennifer Walsh became advocates for my work in educating other entrepreneurs about the warning signs of business fraud. We developed training programs that helped small business owners protect themselves from the sophisticated schemes that had nearly destroyed everything I had worked to build. These relationships, forged in the crucible of fighting for justice, proved to be more loyal and supportive than any family connection I had ever experienced. The most profound lesson I learned through this devastating betrayal was that family is not determined by blood relationships, but by the people who choose to support you when facing the greatest challenges of your life. Emma's actions had destroyed our biological family connections, but they had also revealed who truly deserved my trust and loyalty. The chosen family I built through this experience became the foundation for both my personal happiness and my continued business success. Today, Verde Threads employs over 50 people and operates in 12 states with plans for international expansion next year. The company has become a leader in sustainable fashion innovation, and I have been recognized as Entrepreneur of the Year by multiple business organizations. Most importantly, every success I achieve now belongs entirely to me, built on the foundation of integrity and hard work, rather than manipulation and theft. Emma remains in federal prison where she is serving her 12-year sentence with the possibility of early release for good behavior. I have not visited her and do not plan to maintain any relationship with her after her release. Some people have criticized this decision as unforgiving, but I have learned that protecting yourself from toxic relationships is not cruel. It is necessary for building a healthy and successful life. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely, especially a family member who used that trust to hurt you? How did you find the strength to fight back when everything seemed hopeless? I want to hear your stories in the comments below, because your experiences might help other people who are facing similar betrayals right now. If this story of family karma and ultimate justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and share this video with anyone who needs to hear that truth and integrity will eventually triumph over deception and manipulation. Subscribe to my channel for more real stories about overcoming family drama and building success on your own terms, because everyone deserves to know that they have the power to fight back against those who try to steal their dreams. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to justice. And remember that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most devastating defeats. Life has a way of ensuring that people who choose manipulation over integrity eventually face the consequences of their choices, and that gives me hope for everyone who is still fighting their own battles for truth and justice.